Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to welcome you all for today's panel discussion on education, trends to bring the world closer. As we know, the world is getting smaller, especially in the last decade and a half, and there have been many disruptions and changes, and now happening almost on a daily basis. And I personally feel that education has played a big role in all the changes that are happening around us. As we become more interconnected through technology, globalization, and international collaborations, the role of education is becoming more significant in bridging gaps across cultures, geographies, and disciplines. The need for educational systems to foster not just knowledge but also global awareness, cross-cultural understanding, and collaborative problem solving to bring the world in united or be more unified. I feel honored to have two very illustrious and trailblazing thought leaders, Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar and Dr. Murray Todd. Their perspectives will help us explore the current trends, shaping the future of education and its potential to bring nations and people closer together. We will dive into discussions around digital transformation, the future of skills, the role of higher education in global development, and much more. So let's dive right in. Education has always been a key driver for social change. We talk about education diplomacy and how education is a soft power to empower marginalized groups. So how do you think the trends in education today are helping to bring the world closer together, keeping these factors in mind? Could we start with you? Yeah.
Yeah, very good afternoon to all of you, my fellow colleagues on the dais, and all the students who are sitting here in the audience, primarily school students, and of course the audience that is here to listen to us. It's a very good question. In fact, I was wondering whether there would be any audience for an education session, and more so after Shashi Tharoor left. Didn't know really whether there would be people in the audience, but there are young students, and I think our discussion, Mr. Todd, should now be addressed to the young people here in the audience than the older ones. So, especially for school children, and how many of you are secondary school students? Great. So a large number of students who are from the secondary school. So when you go to the secondary school, you actually start making at least a few choices about your careers. So I may not address your question directly, but I'm trying to make it interesting to the audience. So, so you start making choices about your careers, right? So whether you want to become a doctor, whether you want to become an engineer, whether you want to do history like my friend here who's done history, or maybe, do political science or hotel management like another colleague here who's done that. So each one of us has some ambitions to follow. But let me tell you that these ambitions should be your ambition and not someone else's ambition, and certainly not your parents' ambition, right? So please first bear that in mind, and then we'll move on to the question that was asked to me. So when I was in school like you, I have a colleague, Mona, sitting here from my school, and she knows this. So I always wanted to become a doctor. And so I studied hard. I took science in my 11th and 12th, and then joined medicine in the government medical college here, BJ Medical College. But what am I doing today? I'm actually running a large university and several schools. So while your ambition could be to become someone, you don't know where the destiny will take you to. And therefore my advice and the answer to your question is that try and learn as much as possible from things around you. Try and read as many books as possible so that you get knowledge not just of the subject that you're studying, but a knowledge, as we say, of liberal arts, where you can get knowledge from different disciplines, so that when you actually start your careers, you might join the career of your choice, but destiny may take you elsewhere, right? So now, of course, for the adults here, the new education policy has brought in fantastic changes in the Indian education system, both at the school level as well as the higher education level. And therefore, now students have wonderful choices to actually study. So if I'm doing, say, engineering, I can even study photography, or maybe I can do theater, or I can study history, or maybe I can study culinary arts. So you have all these wonderful choices. Even if you decide to focus on becoming an engineer, your college or your university is now compelled to give you a cafeteria of courses. So all of you as students and all of you as adults should know this, that there is this wonderful bouquet of courses that are offered to students. The second is the impact of globalization, so which means there are a lot of universities and even schools that actually collaborate with foreign partner schools or foreign partner universities, and students gets a chance to move from one school to another school abroad. And that never happened during our times, but we see that happening so often now. So just recently, the Symbiosis school students from standard 8th and 9th went to Japan. SSC board students, they were not even international school students from the Prabhat Road School, could go to Japan, spend 2 weeks there, actually spend time in a school or many schools in Japan, and they came back so much enriched with knowledge. So whenever some of you travel with your friends or with your family abroad or even in India, try and gain as much knowledge from these experiences, because later in life you never know, these same very experiences will help you in your careers. So I'll stop here so that you have some questions for my colleague.
Dr. Todd, would you like to add to that?
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone and good afternoon. And I feel like a real outlier here. I'm from the UK, number one, and therefore you might argue, what do I know? Not a great deal. And number two, I thought that was a great answer. So in terms of adding to that answer, it might be a little bit difficult, but I work for Wellington, and Wellington College is a partnership. And to answer the question, from my point of view, I think the world has never been better for young people in one regard. It is incredibly global. We're going to look at that today, aren't we? We're going to look at how we can connect young people. In fact, not only young people, people of any age. You never end learning, do you? But if I was a young person in the auditorium today, I would be advising you to open your mind, to be prepared to take a gamble. You can do that now. You couldn't do that when I was your age, but I think you can do it a lot easier now in terms of if you want to work incredibly hard, if you want to try and get funding, if you want to try and reach out and go to Harvard or Stanford or wherever you want to go, and there are some wonderful universities in India, but if you want to go further afield, the world is a little bit more open for you. And you hold, as young people, I think you hold a lot of advantages. You are, unlike me, a digital native. I am not. Although I did an IT degree a long time ago, back in 1995, as a one-year postgraduate, I can tell you now I was unbelievably bad at coding. In fact, you couldn't find a worse computer programmer than I. Hence why I moved back into history pretty quickly and realized my limitations. But nowadays, you don't have to be a computer programmer. You have AI to do that for you. You have to be innovative. And you have to, in my opinion, to answer the question, embrace the technological advantage that you have, open your mind, and be prepared to make connections worldwide. I think we're going to come on to that a little bit more, aren't we, later on, in terms of the questions. But I think that we really are in the world now that if you are willing and able and courageous, and you want to take a risk, and you want to embrace the educational advantages that you might have, either in India or abroad, then you can do it. And I think getting funding, especially after the NEP, whereby funding is a big part of that, both vocational and in other courses, then you have a real chance now, I think, to make your mark in life in India and globally. Thank you.
Just adding to that, I think during the pandemic, we've started with online education and it's become really big all over the world. And sitting here in India, students can take courses from various universities globally. India also has offered a lot of these platforms. The government has come up with Swayam and MOOC platforms. I want you to comment on how effective they are in terms of the knowledge that is offered, in terms of application of the knowledge that the students need to do now, rather than studying theoretically. What are your comments on that?
So as I said that, your mind needs to be open. In fact, Shashi, who's a dear friend, always says that the mind is like a parachute, it functions best when it is open. So likewise, all of you as students and the adults should, always bear this in mind, that you should be open to learning. And the best way to learn nowadays, which wasn't earlier, is online education or, through various edtech platforms. And I must tell you that while India has Swayam as its MOOCs, there are so many, dime a dozen edtech platforms that are available, not just for the adults, but even for young school children. So that if you are studying something and you want knowledge about something else, you should always try and earn for, more knowledge and not just limit yourself to what is being taught to you. So today, in fact, it's much easier to gain knowledge than before. We had to open books, we had to go to the library, read, and then gain knowledge. For you all, it is, as he very rightly said, everything is with the click of the button. I'm sure your parents don't allow you, I hope they don't allow you to use too much of gadgets, but nevertheless, whenever you have those gadgets in your hands, you will get access to so much of immense knowledge. But this kind of knowledge which is accessed through Google may not be the right knowledge. So the best way to gain right knowledge is through such courses, as ma'am just said. So there are several universities, several schools that actually have these courses, and where you can be certified, so that later in life when you go to get a job or you want to upgrade yourself in your careers, these certifications, apart from the knowledge that you've gained, these certifications will also help you. For example, given my own example, I just turned 60, Mona, and I thought that, someone said, let's throw a party. My children said, let's throw a party because you're 60. Someone said, let's buy something for you. I love reading. I love, getting more and more knowledge. Of course, imparting knowledge, but also gaining knowledge. So I presented myself with an online program from Oxford University. Because as academicians, and even as all of you young students, Harvard, Oxford, these Cambridge, these are universities of, that you always vie to be, to join. So I couldn't, because I did medicine. So I said, why not gain some knowledge from this great university, which has such a great legacy of thousands of years. And so I did an online course in executive leadership. And let me tell you, while I am, at the helm of affairs of a very large university in this country, but even then, what I gained from this course, which was a 9-module online course, was wonderful. The kind of connects that I made with people there were 92 students, and the 93rd was me. So 92 of my colleagues from different places, from different towns, and from different disciplines, work-wise, gave me so much knowledge on the various discussion platforms that we had. And so I've made new friends, I've gained new knowledge. I got to learn from wonderful professors of Oxford University, and fortunately just last week I got a chance to go to London and I visited Oxford University and the Scythe Business School. So the kind of happiness that one gets, out of gaining more knowledge, applying that knowledge, to whatever you're doing, and of course getting certified. I very proudly put up the certificate on social media because I felt so proud that I've passed at this age and got a certificate from Oxford University. So try as young kids also to gain more knowledge through such certification courses that are available dime a dozen instead of relying just on searching on Google. And that would be my advice to everybody here.
Thank you. Are there any qualifications that you don't have, out of interest? I feel terribly unqualified sitting here. I think, for me, if we're looking at the online bit, then I think the digital platforms that you have in India now and worldwide are really, really impressive. And again, coming back to the NEP, I was on a panel for the NEP a while ago in Pune, and then I went down to Bangalore and did another one there. And I had to learn up quite a bit on the NEP, and I've lived in Pune now for 2.5 years, and I had to learn a lot about it before I came into Pune. And I really like going back to it and looking at it and looking at the real honing in on the digital aspect. And the bit that I would bring up, and please don't be offended by this, I'm not talking with any great authority on it at all, would be that if it is going to work really effectively, then we have to make it open to as many people as we can in India. And that is not a problem unique to India, but India has a population of 1.4 billion. And that will be difficult, I would have thought. That will be a challenge, but it's one that I know the population are taking on board and really going for. And the other bit would be that in terms of that question on online, how do you measure feedback? I think all young people, in fact anybody who's learning, including the courses that you are talking about, and I know that course, in fact, it's a really good course, the Oxford University one, you get feedback on that. And we all like to get constructive feedback and positive stuff, and that might be one problem with online platforms. It can be a little bit difficult sometimes to get the quality of feedback. But the other bit that I would bring up very, very briefly would be, and you may talk about it later, would be online v physical learning and hybrid learning. If I can just very quickly mention that. I mean, my personal belief about online learning is really very, very straightforward. It's far easier now to do it, even compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's far easier, and that is one positive aspect of the COVID pandemic, that we all had to learn very, very quickly. Parents, governors, universities, people like me, young people, we had to learn on the job, didn't we? We had to do it very, very quickly. But I'm pretty compelled to argue that all the young people that I've met pretty much would prefer to be in a classroom and looking at the eyes of other people and picking up on the social mannerisms and learning that way as well. Therefore, if it ever comes down to me, and thankfully I'm a man of no power whatsoever, but if it came down to me, I would always argue that, yep, there's a place for online, it's very, very important, but it will never, for me, wholly replace that social interaction that young people in particular really need.
I think I totally agree, because like we say in Marathi, hadacha shikshak, that's what I am as well. And I always believe that when I'm writing on the blackboard, it gives students enough time to kind of assimilate what I'm teaching, versus if you're going online and continuously one slide after another. I have always wondered how much do they retain with them. But then, everything has a good side and a bad side, but that's how it is. Ma'am, when I was much younger and in school, and I used to cycle up the Kind, Symbiosis was on my left-hand side, and I would see all these flags from different nationalities painted on the building. And for me, it was a very fascinating place, thinking that there are so many students from various countries who are coming here to learn. Now, 35 years later, we are at a stage where almost every institute and every university has collaborations with multiple universities from abroad. A lot of times we see that it is a one-way traffic, unfortunately. Symbiosis has been an exception to it, but in most cases it is progression of the students from India to elsewhere, not the other way around. So what do you think we can change to make things a two-way communication or a two-way thing?
So what you're saying is very right. Symbiosis, attracted, in fact, it was started by my father, Dr. Muzumdar, in 1971, primarily for foreign students and bringing foreign and Indian students together to, of course, with a very noble mission of creating a university, honestly, not even a university, an organization with a very noble motto of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, believing that the world is one family, and we continue to do that. We have students from 85 countries, and we ensure that Indian students, also from different and diverse backgrounds and states, they assimilate together to believe that the world is one family. And I'm sure there are a lot of alumni here and teachers here from Symbiosis who will agree with me. But now with the new education policy, we see that what you said is very right, that finally we have to, India cannot be just a sending country. So while India sends about 10 lakh students abroad to study, there are just 50,000 foreign students studying in India. And therefore, I sit on all these committees to discuss and deliberate how can India increase the number of international students. And it is not just a number game, but when you have foreign students in a class, it brings in a very diverse and rich culture. When a teacher is teaching or when the discussions take place, within the classroom. And therefore, it is as essential for Indian students to have international students in their classrooms as much as it is important for international students to travel to India and experience our culture. So that's a symbiotic relationship that they need to have. The second is, as I said, that the new education policy is now ensuring and encouraging a lot of such collaborations through dual degrees and, joint degrees and so on. And therefore, the universities and even schools, as I said, now have embraced internationalization, not as much as it was before. So you see a lot of Indian universities now attracting foreign students, collaborating with foreign universities, ensuring that we are at the same level playing field. Just to quote another anecdote, because I love to quote my own personal experiences because there could be some learning. I was chairing, or rather leading an Indian delegation recently of Indian Vice Chancellors to the House of Lords to discuss with British universities, and there were 40 British universities, to bring home the concept in British universities saying that let us play on the same level playing field. Let us work on the same table and let us have equitable partnerships. So it's not just a give and take or a donor and recipient relationship that we need to have. It should be a very symbiotic relationship. And that worked out so well that even British universities realized that there are less students who travel from UK outside, and now they realize, and even Americans realize, that English students or British students need an international exposure, whereas Indian students are at a benefit, a huge benefit, because they travel abroad, their parents take them abroad, so, and they're not self-financed students, so they're families that at least take their children abroad for cultural experiences, whereas it doesn't happen so much in the Western world because they're more self-financed, right? So now they realize that yes, they also need to send their students, to countries like India.
Thank you. I won't add much to that, but I would add one comment really, and that would be, I think most people in the UK would benefit in terms of university education if they got out of the UK a little bit more. And it would be of the benefit to young people in the UK doing, doing a UK education to come to India, no question. Not only India, but to feel that international exposure. And that comes back to the online bit, It's all very well getting international exposure in the UK online, but you would benefit a whole lot more if you actually went to a place like India, in my opinion, and you made those connections with the universities a bit more heartfelt. That's my personal view. The other bit I would add in terms of my life would be that I'm running a school now. We've only been here for a year, but we have 20 nationalities, of course, including Indian, and that's very important to me. You have 85, is that right? That's incredible. So, we have 20. I would like that to be as high a number as we can, but for me, it's vital that we always keep that rich tapestry of Pune, Maharashtra, and Indian culture, for me, at the heartbeat as well. Yeah, it's a really interesting area, that.
Yeah. So, we've always sent our students abroad, they've studied, and we see that there are a lot of CEOs who are of Indian origin, who have their base education here in India. So one wonders, why is it that we're not attracting Western students to India? But having said that, do you think that our education system is doing something right? And is that why we are succeeding abroad? Or do you just think it's genetics at play?
Education has a huge role to play, of course. I mean, whether our students are doing well outside India, whether our students are doing well within India, it's all because of a very good education system that we have for thousands of years, which was during Nalanda Takshashila time to even the present education system. And having been at the side of policy making also at FICCI, higher education and so on, we realize that there is always so much of reforms that are going on. Some come out as the national education policy, but even those that do not come out as a policy document, but there's so much that is, always discussed and deliberated, whether it's the University Grants Commission or even at the school level with the Ministry of Education, or even at the state level where the subject, of education is dealt even at a state level. So there are always reforms going on, and I think parents, there's a lot of parents here. Parents also play a major role in the education of their children, right? They're very serious about good education, quality education. They're very serious about the careers that their children, need to make. And Indian parents invest a huge amount in their child's education, which you generally don't see outside. Many of them become self-financed students, and a lot of American students, in fact, get bankrupt, because of the heavy loans that they take for their own education. You don't see that picture in India. Now, of course, the postgraduate programs do have self-financed students, but those who have worked, earn money and then want to finance. But otherwise, typical Indian families would, literally pot kapun, they will ensure that their child gets the best of education. And I think that has made the difference. And of course the good education system.
Yeah, we are really different in that sense, that we take responsibility as parents right till the very end. Todd, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think I can add a couple of things to that. I think if you're looking at it from a Western perspective, in terms of the UK in particular, as I mentioned, they would benefit greatly by coming to India to take advantage of some of the amazing educational opportunities, but it's not easy. You've got to be incredibly brave. I mean, if you're somebody from Pune emigrating to London, or Birmingham, or my homeland of Edinburgh, my goodness me, you've got to be a very brave 18 or 19-year-old to do that, And I always am incredibly impressed by young people, and anyone, in fact, who do that. That'd be one bit of it. The opportunity is there, but you've got to be incredibly brave to take advantage of it. But number two, in terms of anything India might be doing wrong, nothing. I always argue that one of the things that I find incredibly impressive, and I'm looking at it right now, I'm looking at all the young people at the back, here in an auditorium. I mean, in London, on how many occasions on a Saturday will you be able to entice all the young people to know, to put down the Game Boy, to put down the TV, whatever they're on, the iPad, and come in? I don't know. And I am always really impressed by the word that I use is aspirational. I think the Indian educational zest for education is unbelievably aspirational. And I believe that's a huge credit to the country, and therefore, in terms of doing anything wrong, I would argue personally nothing. And if you look at the NEP, coming back to that again, then the investment in education, if I remember correctly, they're looking at trying to get up to 5.7% of GDP, 6% of GDP by 2030, that kind of figure. Now that is really impressive. If you put that into context, that's way higher than my homeland. And if that investment is there, and that's matching the aspiration of parents, as we heard, and young people, my goodness me, off we go. Yeah, and India will go even higher. So I think the future is looking incredibly positive. And final thing, my goodness me, I get it, unbelievable. I never get that at Wellington College, I can assure you. That the final point for me would be that in terms of the Indian families that I've met, for those who may want to go abroad, what I find incredibly positive is that the young people that I've met may want to go abroad to Harvard or wherever, right, or Oxford, but they want to come back. And I think that's a really important point, you know. Yes, they may want to go abroad and do further education. And there's nothing wrong with that, is there? You know, you've got to broaden your mind. Nothing wrong with that, providing you don't forget where you come from. But they then want to bring that back to India, in my opinion, the people that I've met, and add weight to the entrepreneurial development of India. And I think that's marvelous. I really do.
Yeah, coming back to the culture aspect, with globalization, we are now understanding different cultures, and hopefully education will help us become more tolerant as a society. So in that aspect, in India, I think we're moving in the right direction. But when you look geopolitically to the West, and in the recent times we've seen this Israel and Palestine conflict and the amount of protests that went on in every campus in the US, the UK, and many other nations. What do you think can we do differently to ensure that we have more positive kind of influence rather than a disruptive one, something that will unify us rather than divide us?
Actually, here again, as I said, the classrooms and the universities and the schools and colleges play a very important role. So right from young age, when they go to schools, if they have a very diverse background of students within the class, you understand cultures, because you don't understand cultures only by something that is being taught by a teacher, but you understand cultures by actually interacting with your peers. So in Symbiosis, most of the times we ensure that students from different states and a different country live together in the same room, so that when you stay together, you actually understand what is the kind of food, what is the kind of culture that the student is actually sharing with you, and that's how you imbibe this whole secular feeling or a tolerance to people who are not like you or who are more diverse and very different from you. I think it starts in colleges and universities and schools, and I think as teachers and administrators we need to imbibe this feeling of being tolerant to different cultures, and that is really going to help the society at large. So that has been the endeavor of Symbiosis since the last 53 years. While there have been geopolitical crises around, we had so many of our Afghanistan students who studied with us, went back, when the crisis happened, and were just, clueless, and they just lost their education. And so proactively we started online programs for them. We don't charge them a penny, so that they at least complete their degrees and become employable if they later get a chance to in their own country or somewhere outside if they can move out. So these are things that we keep doing, and I'm so happy that Symbiosis students, and also the second is that encouraging your students to travel abroad on some program or the other to understand different cultures. So like we have a global immersion program where we encourage our students to travel to different universities, be there for some time and experience not just the education but also the culture of that country. So I think such experiences given to young people at various levels of education will certainly make the society more tolerant.
I think India is doing a lot in that direction. Todd, would you like to add to that?
Very briefly, I would only add that in my view, whatever culture one is, it's incredibly important to always remember the host country that you're in. And host is not a great word, but you know what I mean by that. And in my case, being a guy from the UK, but I could be American, I could be French, I could be whatever. It is really important that if you are trying to offer an educational platform, either in higher education or at my level, that you never forget that, you might be doing a different curriculum, and you're trying to introduce that to a lot of different people who might come, in my case, from 20 different nationalities, but you're not doing it in London, you're not doing it in Bradford or whatever, you're doing it in Pune. And for me, that is all about the cultural sensitivity of where you are. And people feed off that, don't they? People feed off that. They realize, right, you respect the culture in which you're living, and by definition, therefore, you have to respect their culture. And maybe I'm naive, I probably am naive, but I hope that will lead to a better world, a better dimension ultimately, because, you know, if I get a chance, I'll say this at the end, but really it is all about the young people for me, always. You know, they're the present, they're the future, right? And we've got to make sure that they have that type of mindset culturally, which was not the case when I grew up.
Yeah, I would just like to add a small little incident that we had an Afghani boy who came to our college, and he said, I'm looking for admission for my daughter. And I said, an Afghani girl and hotel management, are you sure? And he said, yes, I have 5 daughters, 5 sisters, and I want to educate all of them. And it was so heartening to see him struggle with the admissions, and I did my best, but it kind of touched my heart that here was a boy from Afghanistan, such a kind of a conservative society who wants his sisters to be a part of this world and contribute. So it was really amazing. So I think that's diversity and inclusion in global education that we talk about. In India, we do have a lot of systems in place or norms in place where we make place for diversity and for inclusion. We have women's reservation, we have caste reservation here, we have economic reservations. Is there anything different that you're doing in your universities to ensure more diverse students come to you and study in your institutes?
So as I said, I mean, I don't want to keep repeating this, that I think the highest diversity in any university would be at Symbiosis. But we do have focus on inclusivity, which I would like to just touch upon. I mean, other aspects of inclusivity. So there's a lot of focus on women and women empowerment. So some of you would be knowing that Symbiosis started a medical college only for girls. So based on the story of Anandi Gopal, the first lady physician of India, who was from Pune. So based on her life story, Dr. Muzumdar, the founder, felt that girls need to be educated in medicine, and therefore they need to continue practicing, and therefore we started a medical college. We've adopted 35 villages around the university campus, and I would urge to all the young students who are sitting here that try and help at least one child who is less fortunate than what you are. It could be your maid's child, or it could be someone from your neighborhood, or anybody. So try and just help by maybe teaching the subject that you are very strong in, or doing something to the less fortunate than what you are, because you are the privileged lot where your parents have the money, the resources to educate you. So at Symbiosis, we've adopted 35 villages, and we focus on educating young girls who are needy and who come from poor families. So we give them total free ships in any program that they want to choose. Most of them choose nursing, medical technology, because they immediately get jobs in our hospital, so they get empowered. So that's another thing. And the third is that we ensure that even in the villages, we run digital literacy, so that our students actually move out into these villages and teach not just young people, but even the elderly, so that they become digitally literate. Apart from this, we ensure that every student of Symbiosis spends at least 4 credits on service learning or community outreach, because this is a privileged lot of students that we get, and I'm sure his school gets. But do they really know the world outside, where there is so much that needs to be done? So if you sensitize these students in colleges, in schools, I'm sure later in life they would want to contribute to that society as well.
Thank you. Just one line from me, really. We've only been open for a year and a half. Therefore, at the moment, we are a fee-paying school, so therefore I bring in pupils, of course, to pay fees. But as we move further forward, it's very much part of my belief that we then have opportunities to give back. And you have to give back in education, don't you? And one of the things I like, and I've run schools for quite a while now, is that I like to bring in pupils who are very aspirational, very bright, very caring, very empathetic, and who unfortunately are not able necessarily to always pay the fees. And that's why we would have scholarships and bursaries at that level. I'm a great believer in that in every country I've lived in, and that is what I would like to do here too. But we've only been open a year. You'll have to give me a bit of time on that one.
I think even as far as community service is concerned, NEP has played a big role now, and it has made sure that this generation is sensitized, like you said. And I'm sure that it's going to be a great generation that is going to come out of this, educational system that we have with us. Going back to research, research is a big topic in India. We speak a lot and do little, is what the perception is really. How can we elevate the standard of research in our universities?
So, if you look at the recent statistics, India's research publications have suddenly risen up as compared to what they were, but the quality of research still remains, at a modest level, I would say. And universities are trying their level best to ensure that faculty inculcate this, or we inculcate this whole ecosystem of research amongst the faculty, amongst the postgraduate students more specifically. But I think it is again to do with the school education system, because typically an Indian state board or even the central board, unlike the IB board, doesn't have this, the art of questioning, doesn't teach the student the art of questioning. In fact, students who actually question are shunned down by the teacher and told to keep quiet, and whereas in universities you encourage questioning, so the teacher hardly teaches, it's the student who presents in the class and questions the teacher and wants to seek more knowledge and so on. So I think this whole culture, if we change, and the whole new, of course the new education policy has brought this in, but at a school level, if you really make students curious about things, encourage them to question, encourage them to innovate, encourage them to even fail at times in certain things and rise up, that's when things will move in the positive direction when it comes to research. But of course, research requires a lot of funding. That's something that the government is now talking about and also ensuring that they will give funding. But universities have to play a major role in ensuring that a research ecosystem is created where everybody, not just the teachers but even students, are encouraged to participate, in finding out something new. So research is not about just publishing papers but really searching for new knowledge, and I think that needs to be encouraged a lot.
Yeah, I think we need to move, like I mentioned before, from theory to maybe application, and then the questions will come. Mr. Todd, would you like to?
Well, very quickly, I think we're maybe out of time looking behind me, but I would echo one point, and that would be funding. Really, for me, most things really in life at that level comes down to funding. And again, that brings me back to the NEP and the percentage of the gross domestic product, which is going up, which is very, very impressive. And on top of that, I would argue collaboration. We've talked a lot today about collaboration, haven't we? Both within India and internationally. I think collaboration is very important in research. If you want one comparable to that, that would be Brexit, of course. If you go back to Brexit in the UK, then even after Brexit, the research collaboration within the universities of Europe didn't end immediately. They have kept it going, they've tried to keep it going, albeit with a lack of funding, but that collaboration and that intent that you're talking about is there. So therefore, for me, it's always about funding, collaboration, intent, and then hopefully the quality of that research in whatever level will go up.
I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to skip a couple of questions and just go to the closing question. Yeah?
Okay, please, you can close it, please.
Okay. When we discuss the trends that brings the world closer through education, what is your message to the policymakers, the educators, and the student community at large to ensure that education continues to serve us as a unifying factor in this world?
I think we've discussed this enough in our earlier questions, but my only request to all the young students here, especially from the school, is that while I know at times subjects are boring, school at times is boring, you like to play on play fields and, not to study as hard as what your parents expect you to, but ensure that, you continue to try and gain as much knowledge as possible, not just from your teachers, but also from your peers, also from books. Ensure that each one of you reads at least one book in a year, if not 6 months or 1 month. ensure that I'm so happy that you're attending literary festivals now. When you go back home, write about what you learned from this festival that you came here. Was it just that you were sitting and chatting with your peers, or was it that you really gained knowledge? And show that paper to your teacher or to your school principal. So try and develop the habit of gaining more and more knowledge, because only when you gain knowledge will you be a wise person. Thank you.
I agree. I'll end on a quote very quickly. It is a literary festival after all, and I know you're looking at me going, hurry up, Murray. So therefore, let's end on a quote, and we'll go for Oscar Wilde. So Oscar Wilde has many, but he said to all the young people, be yourself, everyone else is taken. And I quite like that. Be individual, aim high, but be yourself. Thank you.
Thank you to our esteemed panelists. Yes, we are coming back to question answer session. We don't have time?
Sorry.
Okay.
Very sorry.
Okay, there's somebody who would maybe later down once
You can
we're
take
down,
them offline later.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So thank you once again, and it has been a very engaging conversation. Thank you.
As expected, it was an absolutely captivating and thought-provoking session. We enjoyed the discussion thoroughly. Thank you, Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, Dr. Murray Todd, and Dr. Sonali Jadhav for being PILF guests. Thank you so much.